Well, thank you so much for having me. It is a really cool space. I went to undergrad here, and it's really fun to be up here. So, thank you to Kate and her amazing team. Thank you to everybody for being here. Why is an attorney talking about sustainability and lessons learned? That's because I help my clients to figure out these areas, how to market their business, how to adopt sustainable practices, what that even means, because they say something and they get sued. They utilize a lot of renewable energy, which I did a lot of the projects around here, so it's really fun to see. So I'm going to be talking about that. Please interrupt me at any time. I want to make this a very interactive conversation, not meant to be a lecture. Kate, you'll use does it matter? Okay, I just didn't have an interference. Okay, all right. So sustainability is a word that probably everybody has heard. I mean, literally in the last 10 to 15 years, it's like the buzzword, right? You hear it everywhere, but what does that mean? What really does it mean? Until you start getting into implementing something around it, you really don't. It's kind of one of those buzzwords everybody thinks they know what it means, but then you go to find a definition and there's like literally 1,000 definitions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is sustainability. It really comes down to what you're doing, really, I guess. And then these are just 5 of the lessons that I've kind of gleaned over the years of helping my clients do their projects. And I work with all kinds of industries. I do work with a lot of startups, a lot in the renewable space and the technology space. I work with semiconductor companies, mining companies, manufacturing, all kinds of companies. So every single company that I work with is utilizing, and sometimes governments, and every single one of them is utilizing some kind of sustainability platform and trying to navigate that. So I'm going to go through these lessons. And again, as we're going through, if you have any questions, or if there's anything specific to what you all are doing, I'm sure you're all doing some really cool stuff. Like I said, feel free to ask. All right, so what is sustainability? What does that really mean? I know worked with some different people who are in the room over the past and trying to define what that means. And a lot of times it's around the goods and services that we utilize. And I just pulled a definition from the dictionary. It's having a balance essentially, and that's not just around the goods and services that we use, the natural services that we use, what we consume, how we operate our lives, right? It really comes down to there being a balance that extends over time, and we reserve different things that we're utilizing for future generations. So I guess the first place to start that I always, when my clients come to me and ask me for help in whatever they're doing, if it's a company-wide strategy or a product that they're going to be developing or whatever it is. The first question is, why are you utilizing, why is it that you're going for a sustainable platform? What does that mean for you? And it's different for everyone. And there are different drivers to that. It seems like anymore, the investors and the customers are the main drivers. Yes, the company might have a platform that's sustainability, right? We want to be clean, we want to be a good corporate citizen. We want to make sure that we're doing our part in the ecosystem of business. But really the investors anymore, especially with ESG, that still hasn't been definitively, the rule hasn't been put in place yet, but those concepts are there. And there is enforcement, trust me, out there for people making claims about their governance and such. And so those really are the biggest two. Obviously, as I mentioned, the regulatory, I'll be talking about some of that. There's marketing claims that you have to be careful about. There's debt. There are securities types and investor types of regulations. But really, the investors and the consumers are really the biggest that I see. And then, trying to figure out what that means in the different contexts is really where the So the one thing that I definitely have seen is that companies cannot do this on their own. You might come into it and say, I want to be sustainable. Well, okay. You have customers, you have vendors, you have employees, right? You have all types of different avenues that you have to follow that sometimes you have budgets, right? And sometimes implementing some of this is expensive. And so whatever it is that you're going to be doing for a sustainable platform has to be in partnership with everyone that you deal with to be really successful. I mean, you're going to start, especially if you're a pure startup, right, from scratch, like literally one of those, I'm in my garage, coming up with a super cool idea that's going to take over the world of plastic recycling. That happens right now. You're not maybe going to be thinking about all these other things and how that's going to affect what your carbon footprint is going to be to move your stuff around and all the things that you're going to have to do as a business. But all of those things come into play, and when you're looking at it, you really look at it from a wholesale perspective and start, getting those concepts in place of, okay, what is my entire, what they say, carbon footprint or carbon cycle going to look like? And again, everybody anymore is demanding sustainability, whatever that means to them. Customers want to know that their products are being sourced from, good ingredients, from things that aren't hopefully, detrimental to their health. Your customers and vendors want to know that they're buying products from you or you're supplying products to them that are good and come from a good labor source and all of those things. So I would say the biggest thing is making sure that your plan is tailored to your business, because you cannot try off everything from the beginning. I mean, unless you're some massive company that came into it with a hedge fund or some kind of funding, these things are tough, and working through them, it takes some real strategic and expert advice. And so cost is a big thing. I think people don't understand the cost-benefit analysis when they get into this area, and they say, okay, we're going to have a sustainable plan. We're going to build, we're going to produce this, product. And they start looking into, okay, to do that, we have to look at the carbon cycle to be able to claim that we're offsetting in carbon offsets because our vendors are requiring that, or our customers are requiring that. That's a very scientific and still pretty gray area, right? So understand the cost of what it is that you're going to be able to do, what it is that whatever the area that you're going into in your industry, and what that's going to look like. Environmental benefits is a huge question that is very misunderstood. You can only rely on, let's say you're sourcing something for your company, you need some raw material. And you really have to rely on the folks that are supplying it to you, right? And if you want to truly create a sustainable business and make sure that it's being sourced from, whatever it might be, low carbon inputs or bamboo or low water use or whatever it might be for you, you really have to rely on what they're doing. Because if you make claims about that and what they send to you isn't accurate, you may still find yourself embroiled in a litigation or in a bad PR, and that's really hard to undo. You really can't just rely on your indemnification provisions in your contracts anymore. You have to really dive deeper into what these folks are doing. And then question whether or not you have a dedicated advisor or corporate sustainability officer. Not every company does. Really, some of the larger companies do, because it's important to have that on staff. But it is a question if that's going to be something that's important to your platform, figuring out where to invest that in your people. Because assuming you get someone who knows what they're doing, they're going to help you develop everything you do with that, spotlight on it, right? And so sometimes you'll have corporate or capital decisions or some other question that comes up, and you may not be thinking that may not be top of mind, and that person would say, well, hold on a second, that issue, that company got sued for failing to disclose that their cans actually weren't that green, right? For an example. So those types of people are going to be able to help you navigate everything you're doing soup to nuts. But again, it's an expense. Right? So that may be something that if you're a true startup, you want to think about later down the road, and perhaps something that you build in before you maybe start making claims about what it is that you're developing. Okay. Lesson 2, and I cannot emphasize this enough. Do not greenwash. It's really difficult. I don't know, does everybody know what greenwashing is? Like that right now, I really do. I have it as not showing up very well here. It's a great room. But basically, greenwashing is making claims about your product that aren't accurate or overblown. And usually companies do is get more market share. There's any number of examples out there right now of companies getting sued for making statements about maybe acai in the drink, and there really isn't any acai, so quite as healthy as everybody thought it was, or maybe some product that's greener than it was when they really delved into it. There are companies that is all they do. Is look at claims by what companies are saying. They go get the products, they test them. So it's a really serious issue. I've listed some of the companies there. That's just a few of them. I mean, there are a lot. And in a way, I mean, it's a good way for those companies to make sure there's an even playing field, because if somebody's out there cutting corners and you're not, but they're making bigger claims than you about their products being greener or more sustainable. That's a fairness issue, but it's also it's a consumer issue. So these companies do a good job of ferreting out these claims. Sometimes they're accurate and sometimes they're not. I've had clients get embroiled in them, and they're messy. And what they do is they impact your company reputation. So the last thing you want to be doing as a startup is getting sued for making claims that weren't exactly accurate. And then everything else kind of snowballs from there, and your investors back off, and your customers no longer want to buy your products, and I guess you should probably go do something else. So it's really difficult to get past that, those sort of stigmas. There's also the regulatory, and so the Federal Trade Commission has the green guides. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at the green guide. It hasn't been updated in a while. But I have, some of my clients who are utilizing renewable energy making claims about that renewable energy and saying they were net zero and we're net zero, and somebody, challenged them on that. It's a really difficult place to be. So marketing claims are regulated. Yeah. So be really careful when you go out and you start implementing measures to know that exactly what it is you're offsetting to make claims for using renewable energy or carbon offsets or whatever it is. There's a lot more that goes into it. When you see that on a product, it's probably been vetted and tested and run through any number of lawyers and marketing people to even make it on a product. So just know that. Sometimes you don't care about making the marketing things. You really just want to have a good company, and eventually you'll be making those. But some people want to make sure that people know that they're doing it, so you just have to be really careful about that. The second is the ESG rules that are being proposed right now through the SEC, and those are mostly for investors, folks who market projects. You have to be really, really careful. There's some pretty big cases right now that have gone through settlements where they overstated what the sustainability efforts were, or what they were doing, or what they were utilizing, and got some pretty hefty fines. So there are enforcement provisions with ESG. But the good news is, if you can navigate all of that and make claims that are accurate, you will get a bigger market share, because that's what people want. People want to know that the companies are actually doing all the things that make them feel good about buying your product or using your service. And it's not impossible, but it is a bit tricky. So how do you what's the best way to make sure that you don't end up in that trap? Well, one is, if you're making claims about your carbon footprint, you gotta know your carbon footprint, right? From the get-go. And as I said, that is a really complicated process that involves technical folks that work with us that go and they look at all your different processes. It's fairly expensive, it can be, and that's soup to nuts. So that's from the product, or your service provisions, but also your facilities, the way that your trucks are, whatever it is that you have. And they've gotten a lot better at it, and it's gonna give you a sort of a basic carbon use that's going to tell you what it is that you need to offset or what have you. But again, it's not a perfect science, so we need to be careful about those. But that is one thing that's really important, is to actually know what is that. Whether or not you have a dedicated corporate sustainability officer, or you have someone on your team who that is their focus, it doesn't have to be their official title. Just make sure that someone is following and looking into these things, someone's keeping up on the policies and regulatory things that are coming out. All of those are going to weigh in on what you're doing and your ultimate development of your sustainability plan. Aligning your environmental benefits with your ROI. That means you have a product or a service that you're developing, right? And your investors say, okay, we're going to lend you this money, but we need X return, right? Well, that might start to look different if all of a sudden you have to start implementing a lot of new sustainability practices, and suddenly the ROI just they're expensive, and they sometimes create unknowns. And so that's a balance that you have to figure out. What things are you just adamant about tackling? Hey, we're not going to have manufacturing in this region because if we know it's a hotbed for child labor. Great place to start, right? Maybe you implement that first, and down the road you implement bigger measures. But definitely making sure that those benefits and the goals are aligned. And then partnering with your suppliers and customers with those same aligned goals. So that was what I was talking about. Really making sure that the people who are on your team, that are on your vendor list, customer list, or who are a customer of, share the same goals, because it can throw a wrench into your plan if you get down the road and you're relying on a specific vendor and you come to find out that they aren't, if they were found to be a bad actor, that's really bad, especially when what they're using for you is huge. But, making sure too that as you grow, you want them to grow, and you want to make sure that they're growing in the same sort of aligned mindset as you. You'll be able to invest in a lot in this process. And then you take all of that and a bunch of other things and validate your company message, validate what you're doing, validate your own internal processes, and complete talk about your products and make good products or services. But it can be a bit tricky if you're getting into those and somebody's challenging the claims that you're making. I literally have a semiconductor client which is making some really cool statements about some renewable energy stuff that he did. And there was already an article talking about how, I don't know, this all seems like greenwashing to me. And sometimes it feels like you just can't win. Okay, lesson 3, invest in the communities where you operate. This is a really big one. I have a lot of clients who take this very seriously, and it's one of those things that I think the world is just seems like keeps expanding. Phoenix urban sprawl keeps going, and it's kind of like they're losing sight of each other, right? But I have some really wonderful clients that have gone into communities and just improved them immensely because of what they're doing there. It's just so important to them. And so it's something to think about as you're going in, and that's whether that's your home community, where you operate, or that's where you source your materials, or whatever it is. If you keep in mind those communities where you're operating, I think you'll you will have a much better go and success of what you're doing. Geopolitical, for sure, obviously right now, depending on what you're having to source, products, supply chain are really difficult. My clients that are in the renewable energy industry trying to source, generators and some of the big equipment that they need for their sites, it's brutal right now. Everything is being pushed back because of some of the geopolitical things going on in the world. It has nothing to do with us here or even our country, but it's other parts of the world where some of this comes from. As I mentioned, your location for manufacturing, what are the countries, if you're manufacturing in other countries, which many people do, there are some other great countries that partner with us. Malaysia, Vietnam, China, a lot of the Asian countries. Sometimes they don't have the best practices or other policies, and so that's something to really look at. But sometimes maybe you have to start there, get your footing, because there are benefits to that, with cost and time, right? And then you maybe onshore it, or you do something else eventually when you have more market share and a bigger budget, and you can afford to do that. Human rights is a huge issue. I don't even have to probably tell any of you, you've seen the headlines of the different companies that got hit for having child labor violations and other things. And that's just something you never, ever, ever want to touch your company. So that's something to look at depending on where you are. Labor and training is another big one. I've got a mining client, and they were producing a mine in Africa. And they went into that community and really looked at the community wholesale and said, what does this community need? How can we help them with training, with healthcare, with any number of things, housing, because this is going to be a big part of our development over the next 2 or 3 decades, and we want to make sure that we're giving as much back or more to the community, and we're utilizing their natural resources. And by the way, these are all things that are mined for all the phones and EVs and televisions and all the things that we all use, right? So it's essential, I guess, money for all the things that we consume. But it was wonderful to see what they did there. They completely changed the region. Because they had the mindset, they could just go in and take what they needed and move on. And really created a partnership, too, with that community. So I'm not saying that's something that everyone's going to do, right? But there are increments of that you can utilize. Maybe there's something that they make there that you can help improve or their healthcare situation. Natural resources is a big one. Again, over where you're going, we saw a lot of that in the, still is going on with the rainforest issues and such. But I think a lot of companies changed gears when they figured out, oh my gosh, our products are causing our rainforests around the world to be decimated. We don't want to be doing that. So natural resources is a big question, even down to things like cotton. And I know a lot of companies now are looking at where their cotton is sourced and utilizing different types of products like bamboo, alternative sources that maybe aren't so water intensive and full of pesticides and other things. Longevity, that is one that, that's another buzzword that you hear. But really that means if you're out in a community and you want to be, it's just like my mining plan example, you want to be a part of that community for a long time. You want to come in and partner with them in any way that you can. If you go in and you ask, hey, we're going to just take advantage of this, or hey, this is benefiting us, I think your opportunities for longevity there in the relationship building are going to be less. And then clearly the social, that ranges from everything, depending on what part of the world you're in, even part of the country sometimes that you're in. And so these are just all different. There's more, of course, but these are just sort of issues to think about when you're going and developing a company, places that you can focus to really try to help you be a better corporate steward. Okay, lesson 4. Build a strong network of advisors. And some of this may seem really obvious, it's funny when you're talking about it, it's like, oh yeah, well, of course. Well, when you really get down into it though, it's actually some of the biggest issues are things like this, right? So I have a client and they're developing one of the largest projects, I won't say who they are, but they're figured out, but they're developing one of the largest projects in Arizona. And they had an internal team that was working great. Everything was fine, copacetic. They said, hey, we're going to implement this renewable energy, we're going to use these different sustainable practices, and everything's going to be great. They got a new CEO. And the CEO came in and said, yeah, we're here to make money, and we're going to make money. Well, didn't really go over that well, because we had already spent the last year coming up with those plans and putting all this time and effort to implement these practices. And on top of that, all of the competitors are also implementing those practices. So to come into the market and not do that is kind of crazy, right? But that's his edict, and so we're having to pivot, and it's really interesting to see when he's going to figure out that maybe that's not such a good idea. So make sure that your company is aligned with whatever advisors you have. And I'm not even saying as a startup you're going to have all of these, because you may not do. You are very blessed to have a great group. But the folks that you do have are the best experts you can find, and use them. The times that people will hire me and then ask my advice and then ignore it, I'm like, why are you happy? I mean, it seems kind of silly. So investors clearly, I think, whether it's your own internal funds or you're getting, bigger sources of funding, family, whatever it is, make sure that your investors are aligned with your business. Because you don't want somebody coming in later and saying, yeah, that's not how I want my funds used. We're not doing any of that. That's something that's really important to you. Legal is critical. Obviously expensive as well, it can be. I actually do represent some clients pro bono who are startups. If you can find that, that's wonderful. I can't do that too much because I have to make a living, but there are great resources for legal, critical for protecting your IP early, all the things that sound obvious, but again, one of my clients who's developing a project got their IP stolen right out from underneath them by the investor group that was in the company before they could leave, and it's set them back about 10 years in the market. So they can go redevelop, and they're still doing it, but most people I think can weather that. So legal is critical. Again, it has to be folks who are aligned with you, who understand what you want to do, and can help you get there. And then the technical, depending on where you are looking to and what you're developing, whether it's a service or whether it's a product, those technical folks are going to help you not only obviously build the product or service, but ferret out issues for improvement. So you want somebody who can grow with you as you grow. Again, probably obvious, but I've had clients have to change teams in the middle of a product development, and it's really, really painful, and it set them back. Especially if you have competitors bringing other similar things to the market, and you want to be first. That's a really difficult thing. And then social as well, and that can be your own sort of internal social, mores that you have in your company, what you want to portray, how you want to treat each other. Is it a formal office? Is it a casual office? All of those things come into play. And build into what you're doing with your practice. So you want to make sure that the people that you're hiring are sharing your vision and really do care about what you're trying to do genuinely. It's going to just make it so much easier. And then I hate to say it, but your own company team, right? Sometimes people start and it's a partnership and they think they're on the same page, and then push comes to shove and they're actually not. And so I don't want to overlook the company itself. I mean, those things are really important. Get them in your operating agreements. They're really important to you. You have a sustainability plan that's implemented along with that to make sure that everybody's aligned with the goals about where you're going to invest your funds, and how you're going to be doing that. All right, and then the last one is, here's the example you want to see. Probably like the most obvious thing, but really, it is one of the hardest, I think, to truly implement. And that is, really looking into and being aware of your own interests, your own insights, whether you do that at home, in your own personal life, or your business. Carrying those things into your business really will help it sort of develop in that way. And it's funny, some people are one way at their home life, and then they go to their business and it's a completely different thing. At home they wouldn't dare throw something away that wasn't recycled, or they know where all their food is coming from, or wherever. They get to work and they're like, just toss it, use whatever paper. So those are the things that really, be aware of that, what that looks like, what is important to you. Again, it sounds obvious, but as you start developing, sometimes it can be more difficult. It's similar to your personal and business goals. When you're trying to do something in a business, that's a little bit more difficult sometimes because there's just more logistics involved, or let's say you're utilizing a bank that you found out did something, funded some project that you really is useful to you. Well, it's not always easy to just go change banks, right? I mean, those things are tough, especially if you've gotten established and you have all your vendors and everybody, or your customers set up and all your accounts set up. So, just keeping in mind as you're going, align those goals as much as you possibly can. Definitely flexibility is key. Flexibility in changing course. Sometimes people are so engaged in what they're doing, and they said, oh no, we set it out this way, we have to finish it this way. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. I think being flexible, revisiting your goals often, and figuring out, is this really working for us? I mean, again, that's part of the reason to have a good advisor on your team, specifically dedicated to sustainability, who can challenge you sometimes and have a growth mindset where you're not always just preaching to the choir. Maybe it's somebody who's a little more contrarian and helps you to challenge your thoughts and grow, right? And say, yeah, actually, why are we doing that? That's silly, right? That can help you catch things before you get too far down the road and you're so invested that then it really is hard to change. And then this is something I think, particularly as our country, all you have to do is go to the mall. Make better products, not just more products. We're such a throw services, we're such a throwaway society. It's really unfortunate to see. Every time my two daughters and they want to buy something, like, do you really need that? And what are you going to do with that, right? Am I going to see that in the giveaway pile or the trash bin down the road? I don't think we really need that. I think the same way businesses. Is this something that we really is going to create something that people will utilize, or are we just creating something that's going to get thrown away in the landfill or wherever, ocean? Just some sort of examples of what to look at when you're building your company too. And then finally, one thing that I always tell people, it's really hard to read. Sustainability is it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's something we all deal with every day, trying to get better, trying to utilize products better, do all the things better that we can. Maybe walk sometimes instead of driving in a car or ride a bike, whatever it is, right? We're all trying to improve all the time. It's not something that you just do and say, oh, I'm sustainable, done. So this is an incremental process. So what it says on the left is R&D. I can't read it. So you might start with, your R&D. Like I said, it starts in a country that maybe isn't as ideal for you or where you'd like to be, but that's where you really need to utilize to get to the place where you can develop your product. then you do more waste reduction as you go, and you figure out that process, or your safer ingredients that you're utilizing, right? This is probably the same in your own personal lives. Sometimes those ingredients also get developed over time, so maybe that's something you implement when they're on the market. Same with process changes. That's something too that I've helped a lot of my clients do when they find a better process or more efficient process. You have to go re-permit all of that sometimes, and so that's expensive, especially if they're a highly technical company that has emissions and that sort of thing. So just thinking about those, that it's really sometimes going to take you some time to be in that more sustainable realm, but eventually that's something that's your goal, you can continue to work through. So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions or comments, I'd love to hear about what you're all doing and how your development is going now.
In the meeting we had with the CEO, they made some improvement from sustainability outsourcing, actually pretty profitable to move the company to
Well, that's exactly right. So for people who came here, in the room with the CEO, did anyone mention that sustainability can be very profitable? Yes, absolutely. It can be, and a lot of times companies, their bottom line is the most important, and it's why they're doing it, right? They may not even really care that they're green or not. They just want to save money. They want to put in that renewable energy project and hedge their energy costs for the next 20 years, right? You did bring that up, and I don't think he fully understands it. He came, not in the banking industry, no offense, but he came from the banking industry. So he really hasn't seen it from the perspective that we have in looking at the bigger picture. I think he's going to learn it, but he's my client, so it's like, hey, what are you going to do? But it does save a lot of money. It saves a lot of money in their resources and conserving energy and conserving the products that we're using to be more efficient. All of that should be the bottom line to it, saving money. Well, yeah. Here's the mic.
Hi, thank you for the presentation here. So I have a quick question. I think there's this stigma in the air about companies, Fortune 500 that are increasingly reporting on sustainability. And if you look at the ins and outs, these are 100-page documents and reports really laying it out. Into startups or even smaller companies, I think they'd be pretty intimidating. They don't have the bandwidth, the time, the resources. So what would you advise for companies who are maybe taking that first couple of steps in their sustainability journey when they take a look at these big companies and say, I can't, report this, and take my whole team, years and years. So just curious on your thoughts on that and making that gap between A and Z as far as that goes.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is intimidating. It's intimidating for us to do it every day too. It gets ridiculous, some of it. And honestly, I think some of it is also preventing some practices from being implemented that would have otherwise, because now they have to report on it and they think, oh, I don't know how that's actually going to shake out in the report. Well, we should just implement it because it's a good thing to do, right? And so for startups, I would say, as I said, figure out your plan, figure out your why. What are you doing? What is it why do you want to be quote unquote sustainable? What does that mean to you? Right? And that's to tailor it to your company part. So if you're making a product, let's say, focus on something and say, okay, why do we want to do this? Because we want to improve the products in the market that utilize all these 30 ingredients and whatever. We're going to start and utilize better ingredients, and we're going to source it from places that are regenerative, right? Let's say you have plants that are used in the process, and so they're regenerative, whatever it is. I would just say start and look at your whole company and really have a good vision of that. And then just do things that I don't know you can cheat as you go, because it is hard and it gets overwhelming quick. And just be careful about what you're making claims about. And a lot of times, the folks that are starting out, they're not making claims externally to the market, the consumers. They're making claims to the customers, the vendors, the people who are acquiring you. Hey, we're only going to service you if you are this, if you have this carbon footprint rating, or you have whatever it is, right? Those are the folks that you're having to work with and make sure that you're meeting their needs. It's usually pretty far down the road that you're talking to, getting out and making claims for consumers. And that's where a lot of those reporting requirements come in, and investors into your company. So just start small and easy. And frankly, it really is intuitive if you really start looking at it wholesale. But that's why the advisor part is so important.
I have a question. Yeah. So we hear a lot about founders that are making big claims about technology. I'm thinking like Elizabeth Holmes, right? Or lots of other technology companies that are on the edge of innovation in very difficult fields. They need to raise large amounts of capital in order to unlock that. Where's the delta between sales and innovation and telling a story of what could be than what actually is?
Oh, that would be right here. Validate what you're saying. If you're not doing that, and I think it's that example, it was not only not doing what it said, it was actually harming people, still be doing ever with your products and services, but validating those customer claims is so critical. It's so critical. And hiring folks who can help you do that. Because I guarantee you, if you have the next best thing, someone's going to challenge you on it because they don't want you to be there, because they want to be there, right? So sometimes competitors hire people to take down, figure out the messaging and the products of their competitors, and so just assume that's going to be challenged. And that's the most important place that you can. And that's why all of this stuff comes together, making sure that you've got right folks informing those decisions and what you're saying. Because that's where people get hung up, and they create some great thing, and then claim about it, and then they get challenged, and then they just get off the planet because nobody is going to invest in them again because now they have no credibility, even if they did have a great product.
Any other questions for Michelle? Let's say thanks.